I used to hate cats, used to be dogs all the way, till a cat came along, changed my tune. Now I say I prefer cats to people, and cats seem to prefer me too.
Hello there, cat people. Dan the Catman here, along with Michelle the Meow Maven. Hi, Michelle.
Hi guys.
Stephen Quant, our executive producer and cat behavior expert from catbehaviorhelp.com. Hello, Stephen.
Hey there.
And, and welcome to episode 76 of the Shelter Cats podcast. Maybe we'll get it right this time. The podcast created by Shelter Cats. And joining us for our episode 76 is Hannah Shaw, the kitten lady herself. Hello, Hannah. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
I'm gonna just be happy to introduce Hannah. Hannah Shaw is an award-winning kitten rescuer, humane educator, and New York Times bestselling author who has dedicated her life to innovating kitten care and protecting the most vulnerable felines, excuse me. Her project, Kitten Lady, provides educational media, training resources, and instructional workshops that help individuals and animal shelters learn how to save the lives of kittens in a fun and engaging format. Shaw is the author of Tiny But Mighty, Cats of the World, Kitten Lady's Big Book of Little Kittens, Kitten Lady's Captivity Book, Adventures in Fosterland, and more. She's been featured as an expert on Animal Planet and has received several awards for her advocacy work, including the 2019 Cat Advocate of the Year award by the ASPCA. Shaw is also the founder of Orphan Kitten Club, a registered charitable organization transforming the landscape of kitten welfare in America through shelter grants, ethical pediatric research, and the hands-on care of vulnerable neonates. Since 2019, her nonprofit has provided more than $3 million in targeted funding to shelters to build innovative programs that save little lives. And she lives in California with her husband, Andrew Marttila, their cats, and an endless rotation of foster kittens. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk.
Yeah, great. This is a question you probably get every time you're on a podcast. So, and you know what's coming. But if you could give us a little bit of background in terms of your origin story with animal welfare, all of our listeners, I'm sure, would love to hear that.
Sure. So, I've been an animal advocate for as long as I've been old enough to have an opinion about anything. It was like the first love of my life. And I was very involved in animal welfare, even like in high school and college. But I was more involved in kind of like farm animal advocacy and like advocacy for animals in laboratories and things like that. I always assumed that cats and dogs had it pretty good because they're companion animals. People love them, you know. And it wasn't until I was 21 years old, actually. I was working for a summer camp with children, and I was in a park with these kids, and I looked up into a tree and I saw a little kitten up there. And I thought, okay, I didn't know that kittens grow on trees. That's wild. I'm not athletic, but I climbed this tree somehow. And I've actually gone back to where this tree is, and like a very tall tree. I climbed this tree. I got this little kitten off this branch. I put her in my shirt. I came back down and I was like, okay, what do I do now? I have no idea. I had a lot of friends who were in various parts of animal welfare at that time. And I reached out to a friend. This was in Philadelphia. And she said, well, just don't bring them to the animal shelter because, you know, young kittens, the only thing that they'll do at the animal shelter at that time is euthanasia. And I just, as a person who's spent like every moment of my life doing animal advocacy, I just had no idea that that was what kittens were facing. And so I said, okay, I guess I'll bring her home. And that kitten became my cat Coco, who was my love of my life, my very best friend. We lost her just about 2 years ago to a very long battle, hard fought battle with two different cancers. But that kitten is, you know, who really opened my eyes to this issue. And I have to say, after that, I mean, the story is very long, but I started to find kittens outside all the time. And so I would find kittens, people would find kittens and start to call me. I got kind of a reputation in my community for being the person you call when you find a kitten outside. And I just, through trial and error and talking to other people, there were no resources to teach me how to do this type of care. And I just started being the person that cared for kittens in my community. I started then reaching out to shelters and saying, "Hey, if you ever if you ever have kittens come in, you can call me." Little did I know they would be calling me like 18 times a day. So it became very evident to me early on that this isn't something that one person can do alone, and that there's like an infrastructural issue here. There's a issue of kittens being born outside to begin with and being found by people who, even if they want to help them, the shelters don't really, at that time, really didn't have the resources. Like foster programs, this was 17 years ago, foster programs didn't exist in most shelters for neonate kittens at that time. Even if you wanted to do it independently, there were no resources to teach you what to do. So, as I was learning, I was kind of creating those resources and training other people. I became really passionate about education because, these resources were not available. So, I started teaching people, I started creating classes and creating videos and things like that far before. I mean, this is like dating myself, but this is like before social media really existed. So I was just doing it kind of like for people in my community. And then as the world became a more internet-based, social media-based place, that just kind of took off because it was the only resources available there. Career-wise, I've always been able to work in animal welfare for a very long time. I worked for national and international organizations in various areas of animal welfare, but there was no organization specifically focused on kittens. So I founded my own. So in 2016, this is our 10-year anniversary, I founded Orphan Kitten Club, which is my nonprofit. And I'm really proud that 10 years later, we're like stronger than ever, doing really great work that I'm extremely excited about. And, in these 17 years, I've been able to see a lot of change in the shelters, in public awareness of this issue, in the veterinary world, and access to, just even information for vets about how to care for some of these unique cases we see with kittens. It's a very multifaceted path that I've been able to kind of be on and get to kind of attack this issue from so many different angles. And I just love it. So that's the short version of how I
It,
how
it
I came
sounds,
to be
yeah,
where I am.
it sounds like you were actually the right person at the right time. Like you
Yeah.
intersected with a movement right I mean, obviously it would be great if it could have happened even before then, but sounds like you were right there on time to start this process. Listen, for our listeners, because we're going to be talking a lot about neonates, right, today. Can you just help our listeners understand what a neonate is as we kind of work our way into more substantive
Sure.
questions?
Yeah. So when I say that I work with kittens, sometimes people picture like, a kitten that's like wildly bounding around your house, like the energetic kittens that people adopt. But I work with 0 to 8 week old kittens. And I really passionately work with 0 to 5 week old kittens. Those kittens who are unweaned is really my like very strong area of expertise and focus for the work that I do. Um, 8 weeks is an important time in a kitten's life because it is the time here in the US that traditionally these kittens would be getting spayed, neutered, and adopted out. They're at a phase of their life where they can uh, survive with the type of typical care that an adopter gives. Prior to 8 weeks, those kittens need to be in some kind of program, like a shelter program, a foster program. And unfortunately, 0 to 8 week olds are by far the most at risk in animal shelters. So actually, about 60% of cats who die in shelters are under 8 weeks old. It's by far the most vulnerable population, age and species wise, of any animal in shelters is 0 to 8 week old kittens. That's because these kittens are coming in droves, in boxes and bins, with their eyes closed at a point in their life where they are not able to be eating independently or going to the bathroom independently. These are really, really vulnerable young babies. And unfortunately, in the States, uh, we have a lot of cats giving birth outside. A lot of people are not aware of that. So they bring them in thinking like this is an abandoned kitten when 80% of the kittens who come to our shelters are found by Good Samaritans bringing them in from outside. So it's a major issue, the orphaning of kittens. And most of the time, they're not an orphan. Most of the time, they're born to a community cat. So these kittens come into the shelter. They, are possibly going to be euthanized there. The reason being that they can't stay there overnight. Most shelters are not 24-hour operations where they can be bottle feeding them at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, unfortunately, that's why the end of the day can really mark whether this kitten survives or not. And the difference being, did they get a foster home or did they not? So, this is a population so dependent on just the everyday people signing up to foster. And that's the population that I focus on. After 8 weeks, I love cats and I love teen cats and whatever, but that's not my issue to tackle. If under 8 weeks is what I'm so passionate about, because those are the babies that if we don't get them out by the end of the day, they might not get out at all. So that's
So,
my population.
on that subject of orphan versus not orphan, I want to ask this one more question before maybe I turn it over to Michelle. What would you say to someone who they see a very young kitten in their backyard or nearby, right? And it's struggling to walk, and they're like, "Oh, let me bring this kitten home, or maybe bring it to a shelter. I want to I want to save this kitten's life." What do you say to these? What would you like these people to know?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is we have lots and lots of community cats, so free roaming outdoor cats in the United States. And just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. They're pretty good at making themselves scarce if they don't want to be seen. So that's something to know. That being said, there are cases where kittens, do need our help and intervention. So there's not one exact answer to what do you do if you find a kitten outside. There's sort of questions that I ask somebody if they found a kitten outside. And I have a method that I use. I call the CASA method for this. So it's CASA. First is C, condition. What condition is this kitten in? Are they like covered in bugs? Are all of their litter mates dead? If so, that kitten needs intervention. Like whether the mom is there or not, that kitten needs
Mhm.
intervention. Is the kitten struggling with a health thing? Or do they look like a clean, fuzzy little potato? Because if they look like a clean, fuzzy potato, someone is taking care of them and it's not the neighborhood raccoon, it's their mom, right? So we don't need to necessarily see mom to know that mom is there if the kitten is in good condition. So that's C. The next one is age. What age category are they in? If they're under 5 weeks, they're dependent on mom. So if they look in good condition and they're under 5 weeks, we really want to leave them with mom. Now, that could mean that you leave them where they are if they're in a safe space. It could mean that if you're personally willing to like let them be in your bathroom or something, you just want to scoop the whole family, including mom. So that's the next thing is age. What age are they? The S in CASA is the situation they're in. Are they in a safe situation or an unsafe situation? So, are they in the middle of the highway? Well, it doesn't really matter if they have a mom or in good condition. They're in an unsafe situation. Whereas if they're in, a shed in the backyard, that's a pretty safe situation. You don't necessarily need to scoop them up from there right now if they're young and they're in good condition. And then the last one, the second A, is ability, which is like, what are your personal abilities? What are you personally willing to do? And what are the abilities of your community? Is it the height of kitten season and you are in an area with like one rural shelter that is overloaded with kittens? My answer to what you're going to do might be different than if it's, January and there's like very few kittens coming in and the shelter has a waiting list of foster parents who would love kittens. So we kind of look at these different factors, good condition, bad condition, what age range are they in, uh, to decide are we intervening or not. And of course, truly like the personal empowerment of the individual who's found them does play one of the largest roles, because every shelter, as you know, is overloaded with animals most of the year. And so if a person is personally willing to help out, that's also going to change my response of what they should do.
That is the most interesting response to that question I've ever heard. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
It's
great.
really, really, I'm like literally memorizing, trying to memorize your
You don't
answer.
have to memorize it. I have a poster for shelters. If you go to my website, kittenlady.org, I have a lot of posters and videos and articles, but that one, if you just look up CASA, you'll
Okay,
find it.
great. And I know, you mentioned age is an important thing, and I want to kind of hand it over to Michelle for a moment because I know Michelle had a really interesting, at least, for those of us who don't deal with neonates very often, and even though my shelter does have overnight care for them, I'm not personally dealing with them. But I know Michelle had a question that relates to this.
Yeah, I mean, my question is kind of an umbrella question of how do you determine a kitten's age? I had, my questions I can relate specifically to one of my kittens that I have. This kitten, her name is Chi Chi, and I got her last year. She was a rescue in a parking lot in an engine block of a car in a parking lot. Some friends found her and rescued her, and she was in really bad shape. She was super tiny. We thought maybe she was just a few weeks old, maybe a month, 2 months tops. But when I brought her to the vet and the vet kind of gave her a really good looking over, she assessed that she was about 4 months old, but she was just super super tiny. Even to this day, if you look at her, I have a kitten that I got earlier this year who was born in April. She's double the what is that, 7 months, the 7 month old is double the year and a half year old size. So she is just a teensy tiny kitten. So how do you know? You can't go by size alone, you have to look at other
Yeah.
factors, right?
Yes, you make a very good point. Weight is definitely not how we tell a kitten's age because, like
Right.
you say, there are very different body conditions that these animals might be in. Some of them are those potato babies, some of them are
Yeah.
like underweight. And then also, even just depending on kind of their genetic background, some breeds of cat they're naturally more slight or smaller. So we see lots of different variation in weight. What we do to determine a kitten's age is much more about kind of their stage of development with various parts of their body. So, for example, we'll look at their eyes. During the first 2 weeks of life, I could tell you almost to the day a pretty good estimation based on their eyes and their presence or lack of umbilical cord. So, for
Right.
example, if they have an umbilical cord and their eyes are closed, I would age them at 5 days or younger. Um, if they have no umbilical cord but their eyes are closed, I would age them at like 5 to 8 days. If their eyes are starting to open, I'd age them at like 8 to 10 days max, 8, 9 days. Their eyes will start to, open slowly. It takes a couple days, but that's really like 8 to 12 days is when we're seeing that. So if they're super tiny, ears are still like tight to the head, but eyes are open, I'd age them like, 12 days, 13 days, 14 days. Um, they will have no teeth at any of these times. So after we have like open eyes and no umbilical cord, now we're moving more to looking in the mouth. So if we have a kitten with open eyes, I'm going to be looking in their mouth. Do they have any teeth? No, I'm going to put them more towards 2 weeks. Do they have the little tiny teeth at the front of the mouth coming in? 3 weeks. Canine teeth, 4 weeks. Premolars, 5 weeks. After that, then we're looking at eyes again because as the kittens are reaching more like 6 weeks, their eye color is going to start coming in. So they
Oh,
have blue eyes during that whole time, and then you'll start to see that as the melanin production starts to increase, they will have these streaks and strands coming in of gold or green or whatever it is. So if we
and that's
see
about
like
six
this
weeks, you said? That's
about
like
six
six
weeks,
weeks
yeah.
Okay.
So around 6 weeks, if we have a kitten with all their teeth, all their baby teeth, and then we have the beginnings of those colors coming in, I'm thinking 6.5 weeks. If the eyes are fully green, gold, any color other than blue, they are at least 7 weeks old. And then from there, it does get a little bit harder to tell because they're not experiencing such drastic changes week to week after 8 weeks. And admittedly, I don't really interact with that many kittens past like 9 weeks because all of my kittens get spayed and neutered pretty much on their 8 week birthday and then they go home. So,
Right.
but that's how we do it here. And I do have a lot of resources to help people through that. I know that was probably a lot to absorb, but I have a poster to help shelters determine that. I have, videos and articles about aging kittens as well.
It was fascinating. I actually have a weird follow-up question,
Yeah.
which is there are a lot of when kittens are born, they're basically helpless. My understanding is they're helpless in a way that protects their survival. They can't and they can't get away from mom. They can't hear and they can't see, so they're like completely dependent on mom. And these things start to mature, they start to become a little bit more independent. Is there an evolutionary reason or a reason why their eyes are blue and don't have melanin until later? Does it do something for them?
That is a great question. I mean, I can tell you that their vision really does change over those first weeks. Like, just because their eyes are open doesn't mean they have really very great vision at all. I don't know that I can speak specifically to like an evolutionary reason for the blue eyes, but I can tell you that when I say they're born with blue eyes, if you look at a 2 week old kitten's eyes, you'll actually think they look black because their pupils are so enlarged that you almost can't see the blue. A 2 week old kitten, if you try to take a picture of a 2 week old kitten, it's hilarious to see people who don't work with kittens do that because they're like, look over here, little baby, waving their arms. And I'm like, I mean, they're not looking at you. There's something magical that happens, which is like around 3.5 weeks old, these little babies, their vision starts to really improve as they start to be able to dilate their eyes. And all of a sudden, one day, they're just like looking back at you and they're like looking you in the face, and you're like, oh my gosh, you see me. And it's very exciting. And that's when, at 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks, they're starting to like get their eye paw coordination. They're starting to want to interact with things in their environment. Stephen, I know you work with cat behavior, so maybe like that those play behaviors, they don't really come in for like newborns, but once they're like 4 to 5 weeks old and they can actually see their environment and touch things in their environment, they really start to develop that like interest in like toys and play behaviors. So there are definitely, I would say, there's probably some evolutionary reason for keeping the kittens close to mom during those times when they are the most vulnerable. Interestingly, that also aligns with their thermoregulatory mechanisms. So like they can't thermoregulate under 4 weeks. They're like dependent on body heat from others. So huddling with their siblings or cuddling with mom. And you kind of see that as that's going away and they're able to sort of leave the nest for more time, it's also when their vision is developing. So maybe it
Very
really
interesting.
is just they don't need vision,
Yeah,
strong vision
I
younger.
used to joke in a Q&A I would do in a webinar that I give that I can go a year before someone asks me a question I haven't heard before. And maybe my blue eye question was, kind of comes into that.
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, it is a great question.
So, one more quick, well, not a quick question, a big question. There are people out there, listeners, who are going to take in a very young kitten. And they're going to,
Mm.
whether they assess the kitten because they listen to you on the show, we don't know, but they're going to take this kitten in. And while saving a neonate's life is a complicated task, and we don't want to make people go in the wrong direction, or we don't want to put kittens at risk, are there some things you can just tell our listeners the basic things that they should do to help save the life of a very young kitten who is not able to eat on their own? Let's put it out as that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you're interested in fostering neonatal kittens, first of all, I say I believe everybody can learn how to do it. Like, I do not think you need to be an expert. You don't need to. People ask me like, "What do you need to go to school for to care for kittens?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, we need everybody who is willing to care for kittens to give this a shot." So, even if you have no experience, you can learn. Um, what we want people to know is if you have your first newborn kitten, I mean, one thing is, like I was talking about, the thermoregulation is really big. So every kitten needs a heat source if they're under a month old. The body temperature is having the right body temperature is essential for all aspects of like organ function and the ability for this kitten to succeed. There's a lot of interesting studies looking at kind of environmental temperature and the like health of the kitten and the survival rates of the kittens. So having something like a microwavable heat pad, or even if you have a heat pad that you use at home. Just make sure that it's on like a nice, like low to medium with a blanket over it, but that they have a place they can go to be warm and that they have choice. So even a newborn can choose to wiggle towards this side or that side. So, keep them contained in a bin or a box or a carrier. Give them a heat pad on half of that. That's like gentle heat they can move towards and away from. You want to know what age they are so you can determine their feeding schedule. And then during their feedings, the main things to know is, at each feeding, you're going to help them go to the bathroom if they're an orphan. So you will stimulate them with a tissue that helps them just, eliminate waste. And that's something that mom does typically for them. So if you have a mom cat, fantastic, because she does that part. Um, but if you don't, then you're going to be doing that. And if you
Wet
have an
tissue or
orphan,
dry tissue?
dry tissue. Anytime somebody says, I use a wet tissue, I'm like, well, that's not very absorbent. You wouldn't like necessarily like mop up liquid with a wet tissue, right? So they're peeing into this tissue, so we're just gonna like gently stimulate them until they're done peeing. They'll pee every feeding, and they'll poop like once or twice a day, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then we're going to feed them. So what you need to know about that is, let's see, the very fast version is kittens have specific nutritional needs. So you got to feed them kitten formula. Please don't try to feed them something out of your refrigerator. I promise you that's going to go really poorly because their bodies are designed with specific nutritional needs. So there is an abundance of kitten formulas available at local stores. So grab yourself a kitten formula. You're going to put it in the kitten bottle. I will tell you one tip that I have is like the nipples that come on the bottles from the store are as good as garbage. Throw them away and get yourself like a nipple that is they sell like aftermarket nipples. One that I really like is called the Miracle Nipple, and it has a hole in it already. So get yourself one of those. That's like if someone was willing to spend $10 on their fostering journey, that's the one thing I would tell them to get, just because when you're feeding a kitten, at first they don't know what you're doing, right? Like you're putting food into their mouth, and just like you don't put like liquid into the mouth of an unconscious person or someone who doesn't know what you're doing. When you're putting liquid into a kitten's mouth, there's a high risk that they might inhale that or aspirate that. So the Miracle Nipple or any of those types of like aftermarket nipples that have the little hole in the end of it, those are going to be a lot safer than you cutting these like terrible nipples yourself. Oh, sorry. It's my dog's medication alarm. Um, so, uh, yeah, let's see, what else do I want to share? Yeah, so when you're feeding your kitten, sometimes I think it can appear easier to people than the first time they try it, and they go, oh my gosh, you make it look so easy to bottle feed, and it's actually really hard. But it's not hard. It's just something that you have to kind of like build muscle memory around, and every kitten is an individual. So you're going to look at it like an art form, that you are like making art with this kitten, and you're going to figure out like, what does this dance look like between me and you? Every kitten's a little different. But hold your bottle in your dominant hand, hold the kitten in your non-dominant hand. And I mean, it's really hard to say without like just showing you, but I have a lot of resources to teach you the way to the, oh, nice. Yeah, I have a lot of resources to show you kind of like postures and hand positions. If you go to my website or on my YouTube, I have a lot that can show kind of like correct postures and hand positions for feeding kittens. But that's like a very, very quick. It's hard to do without like having a kitten.
You don't have a kitten handy, Hannah?
I actually do, but I'd have to like get up and go get them. I always have kittens handy.
I think by explaining this though, rather than treating it as a full instructional thing, it's letting our listeners understand that there are procedures and techniques that need to be
Sure.
utilized in order to keep this kitten thriving and growing. So I think that's really great. And
Yeah.
Michelle and I were talking earlier. She's got these great questions that are so much more interesting, I feel, than mine. They're just so practically oriented. But I want to hand it over to Michelle again because I want to hear one of your questions again.
All right. Well, I am gonna jump topic just a little bit because your dog alarm going off reminded me that Dan normally asks when he's feeling better. The big question that Dan normally asks is what kind of pets do you own? How many cats? What kind of dogs? What do you own? What's in your house?
Okay, so I have 3.5 cats, is what I say, because I have 4 cats, but one of them is like she is a fully feral cat that doesn't like want to interact with us. So um, I have her in the sense that I'm responsible for caring for her, but she does not hang out with us. We inherited her, unfortunately. One of our friends passed away, and
Um,
I'm sorry to hear
he
that.
was caring for her, and we made a commitment that we would care for her. So we love her so much, but she doesn't love us back, and that's
oh,
okay. But we have 3 lovely cats of our own that do love us back, and that's Ferguson, Shoo Shoo, and Haroon. And then we have 2 little chihuahuas that are actually smaller than our cats.
they are so
Um,
tiny. One of my girlfriends has two chihuahuas, and aside from the one I mentioned earlier, the little Monchichi, my other two cats are again double. Like Chi Chi is about the size of a Chihuahua. Like she is like this
mhm.
tiny little, and she's bow-legged. So really, I think she's part Chihuahua. Like I'm convinced.
Do the Chihuahuas get along
Yeah,
with your cats, Hannah?
they do. Yes, there are. It's so fun to have, as you know, to have animals and to see their little personalities and like the
Hmm.
little alliances they have, because I feel like their relationships are also different with each other. But like some of them, they're
Absolutely.
like little bandits together, where it's like my cat Shoo Shoo and my dog Birdie will like really work together using their skills to like try to get access to food that they shouldn't have. Um, and it's
That's funny.
hilarious. So yeah, they do all get along. I mean, everybody's got like a little sassy moment every once in a while, but that's to be
Absolutely.
expected. But
Nice.
yeah,
I
everybody
can
gets along
relate
pretty
to
well.
um your 3.5 cat situation. I basically have 5.5. My Rosie, um, she wasn't a foster fail. She failed as a foster herself, is the
Mm,
best way to describe it. She has an intense dislike of men. From whatever happened to her in the past, she was on the streets with her kittens, and she was rescued with her kittens, and she went from foster to foster because she's very terrified of everything, and
mm,
specifically men. So she lives here. She'll sit on the foot of the bed with me when I watch TV, but if I come within like her force field, her zone, she will
hmm.
run terrified. 2 years later, run terrified under the bed. So I can relate to that because she's very sweet. She's happy to be here. The cats love her. They all love her. All my males have a crush on
Mm,
her.
mm.
But if she looks at me, she's like, "Oh my God," and she runs under the bed.
Well, I think it's lovely that you're giving her a great place to live her life. And I think like the important thing with having cats of varying socialization levels is just to sort of respect that, like people ask me, am I gonna try to make Sam into a friendly cat? And she's like a 9-year-old cat who I just am
Yeah,
not in the business of trying to like force something upon her. We love her from a distance if we need to love her from a distance, and and I think that there's lots of different ways to love a cat.
You, Hannah, and
absolutely.
Dan both brought up this interesting concept. 3.5 cats, 5.5 cats. I know a woman who has multiple cats. One of them won't touch her, won't allow any touch. But she discovered that when she was asleep, the cat would come up and touch her. So she would pretend to be asleep in order to feel the cat's touch, which was really sweet.
Oh,
But can you, and I have strong opinions on this subject, and it's part of what I do, and I find it really fascinating. But I
Sure.
want to give you, Hannah, the opportunity to talk about what you think the essence of a cat is. People talk about dogs as being this thing, and cats are aloof, right? The whole stereotype. Dogs are super social, cats are aloof. Talk to us a little bit about the essential nature of cats and what you think.
Mm. I mean, I would say cats are as variable as humans are. Like they can live so many types of lives and they can have so many types of personalities and likes and dislikes, and that's what I enjoy about working with cats. I mean, I like I said, I primarily work with kittens, and there is a little bit more like not molding, but like influence you can have when they're a newborn kitten in their life. But like for our adult companion cats, they're all so different. For example, my cat Ferguson, he like loves to go outside. I take him on walks on a leash and harness, and he's just like the happiest guy out there. And people think you can't take your cat on a walk. And I'm like, Ferguson stands by, like, if we take the dogs out, he stands by where the harnesses are and like cries and is like, please
Oh my
take me
God.
out too, which is awesome. So, I mean, I would say if I was going to paint with a very broad brush about cats, I guess I would say I think they're, um, like independent is not a word that I like to use because it makes it sound like they don't need us, and they definitely do. Like they definitely need our advocacy and our support and our care. But I think that they have something like wonderfully like self-assured about them. They just like
Mm.
know who they are and don't compromise on it. And I think that's fantastic. And I think what makes a person good at working with cats is being able to have that sort of like respectful consent with another
Mm.
living being and really see who someone is. And to the extent that we want to intervene in some way, it's not about like forcing a change upon them. It's more about like respecting who someone is and then like working with like what is the relationship here. And uh I don't know. I mean, I really love seeing the different personalities of our animals, but they're all unique. So I mean, I don't even know what to say about the essential nature of a cat.
Well,
I think is just that they are themselves.
and before I hand it back to Michelle, I want to just mention this idea of choice, agency, and consent. As an
Hmm.
example, at Animal Care Centers of New York City, where I also work, we do consent for touching, both for
Yeah.
dogs and for cats. And we also recognize that a dog or a cat can give you consent to pet or touch and then withdraw that consent. And
Hmm.
so just because they tell you it's okay doesn't mean they can't change their mind.
Yeah.
And being respectful of that and being respectful of the lack of agency shelter animals sometimes feel because they're in a kennel. Their choices are more limited. So I love that you honor that and respect that. Michelle, can I hand it back to you for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So another thing, this is all my questions are deeply personal for me.
Yeah, please.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about is trimming claws. I am horrible at it. I cannot seem to like I can't seem to have that, and it's been every cat I've ever had. And I always say, well, the cat doesn't let me, the cat doesn't let me, when and the reality is I know I'm not firm enough about it. Like I'm not like I don't take control of the situation. I fully recognize that. I fully accept that. But what sort of tips would you give? Like, so again, I'm just gonna use this my Monchichi, who I consider my quasi feral cat, also because she's got a bit of the wild in her, but she doesn't even really let me pick her up. She'll come and sit with me, but I can't pick her up and hold her. So the idea of holding her and trying to keep her still while I have, sharp implements in my hand, it just is, I can't even fathom that. So
Yeah.
what would you say? What would you suggest?
Sure. Well, I mean, working with neonatal kittens, I will say, like, if you're a foster parent, one of the things that we do is expose them to lots of different things at a young age. So, touching their paws, doing claw trims when they are, 4 or 5 weeks old, 6 weeks old, is a way that we can make that so that later on, that's like normal to them. It's not
Yeah.
this new scary thing. So if you have a young kitten, that's one part of just exposing them to the world so that they will be able to cope with those things in the future. For an adult cat, I mean, again, I think for me, it is about kind of like meeting them where they are. If they're like running around the house being playful, I'm not gonna try to
Right.
trim their nails because it's not the time for that. I think that doing it when they are a little bit sleepy, doing like paw touching, even not for purposes of trimming nails, but just for getting them exposed to having their little paws touched. But ultimately, if you're not comfortable with it and they're not comfortable with it, like they can tell that you're not comfortable. And I would say, with my chihuahuas, I'm very good at trimming my cat's claws. With my chihuahuas, I take them into somebody who, all she
Yeah.
does literally is it's like just called podicures. She does
Mhm.
animal claws, and she's great at it. And sometimes let the expert be the expert if you really feel nervous about it. But again, I'm not an expert in like adult cat behavior, so I don't know if I can give like the very best answer to that, but
My
that's what
my
I
friend has someone who makes house calls to clip claws.
it's great.
So there, I've heard of professionals that do that, and will burrito my friend's cat and just clip the claws in and out. It's like a 5-minute visit. So I've heard of
Michelle,
that.
I'll give you one additional thought. When we were talking about consent, there's another layer to consent, and it's what I'm going to call the language of consent. In other words, every pet, every cat, every dog has a method by which they would prefer to be treated, and that's different than that cat. Like my cat Cricket, very food motivated. Right now I'm stuffing a huge pill down her mouth every morning. But she knows that there's going to be an extra breakfast right afterwards. So she comes and asks me for that breakfast, that extra breakfast,
Hmm.
right? The happy meal. Even though she knows the pill's coming. And then she's like, but I'm okay, all right, good. And then she's like, now I get the meal. So there may be a way to talk to your cat behaviorally that allows your cat to give you some consent over this.
We she's a tricky one. I would love for you guys to come out here and meet this little kitty because she's a crazy little cat, I will tell you. But
Um,
I mean the other two, I'm horrible with the other two as well, but at least Delilah can get her front paws. And Eddie, I haven't even tried Eddie Ann yet, but she's amenable. I'm sure she'll be fine with
you know,
whatever I do. It's just the little one that Chi Chi that's
There's this new thing on social media. I don't know if it works, but it's basically like a puzzle box that's lined with sandpaper, and they're pushing it as a
mm,
way of dulling a cat's nails. I don't know if it works. I'm not advocating it, but
I've
it
seen
looks
that. Yeah.
interesting. I've always wanted to put sandpaper in the bottom of a litter box and kind of glue it down so that when they're digging, they're like, dulling their nails.
So
Switching gears for a second. Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead. I was gonna, I'll jump in afterwards.
Okay. So Hannah, you opened my eyes to an important topic when Hannah and I met at the Ultimate Cat Conference outside of Nashville earlier this year, well, 2025. And I mentioned something to you when we were in that room where you were going to do the meet and greet room, and you said, "Oh, I'm going to be talking about this in my presentation," and the subject was fading kitten syndrome. And something that a lot of people have a belief structure around, I'll just say it that way. And maybe some shelters do too. And I'm curious if you could define for us what people think fading kitten syndrome is and what your thoughts are on that subject.
How much time do we have?
We've got
All the time you need.
Okay. So, yes. So I guess I'll start by saying mortality rates are higher for young kittens than they are for, the average like teen kittens and adult cats. So when there are young kittens in a shelter program, if you're a foster parent or a shelter worker, you might hear this term thrown around that people will refer to as fading kitten syndrome, which essentially is a way that historically people have described just the death of a kitten for an unknown reason. So it often describes things like this kitten seemed fine, all of a sudden they're lethargic, and then they, rapidly decline and die. And I will say I am not a fan of this term at all because I think, is really disempowering and really, honestly, it is just not accurate. There's no syndrome that just causes a kitten to decline and die. There are age related disease processes, just like for a senior cat. So when we think about like senior cats who decline and die, right? They decline and die because of causes, right? Like diabetes, kidney disease, cancer. These are age associated with senior cats or causes of decline and death. And the same applies to kittens. It's just different disease processes. So kittens dehydrate really easily. Kittens are incredibly prone to bacterial infection and sepsis. Kittens are more vulnerable to viral disease because they're under vaccinated and overexposed. There's a lot of different things that make a kitten vulnerable to disease. And that can look really rapid for them. It looks really rapid for them in part because their body systems are not fully online yet. So like their immune system is not fully functional yet. Their organs aren't fully developed yet. And so, dehydration of an adult cat, they have compensatory mechanisms where they can, retain water. They can compensate with their, thermoregulatory mechanisms like we were talking about. For a young kitten, they can go from fine to organ failure in a day. They can go from fine to sepsis very rapidly. And these are often conditions that people in foster care system and in the shelter system, if they haven't been working with neonates closely for a long time, it's not like things that everybody encounters with their cats every day, right? These are kind of specific age-related issues. And so that's why, for me, it's very important for us to be engaged in research and education in the veterinary world as well as the shelter world, because there are just specific vulnerabilities that this population has. The reason I take issue with the term fading kitten syndrome is because it's often used as a explanation for why a kitten passed away or why a kitten is declining. And to me, that takes away all the opportunity for curiosity, for diagnostic, for diagnosis and intervention. And there are things that we can do for these kittens. When we don't just say, oh, well, some kittens just fade. Like, yes, some kittens decline and die, but there are generally causes that if you do a little bit of digging, like you might be able to find that cause. Did this kitten, were they exposed to calicivirus? Did they develop a bacterial infection of the gut that led to sepsis? Did they there's so many different things that can happen with these babies, and a lot of the time we can treat them, right? They start to experience bacterial disease, we give them an antibiotic. They are on they're on track for like significant dehydration, we can give them fluids. They're vomiting because they have panleukopenia, we can give them a medication that will prevent vomiting. We can do things to keep their systems online while they go through some of these things that are actually just acute illness. Panleukopenia, can we keep them alive for 3 days while they get through this? If we can save them, and we're very successful in doing that. So I think the reason I don't like that term is because I prefer that people stay curious about what's going on with animals. And if you say, okay, this kitten is declining and I don't know why, but I want to find out, then you're going, okay, well, let me take their temperature. Let me consider their environment. Let me consider, like, send out a fecal, like, there's so many things we can do to determine, oh, like, this is what's happening with them. And then there's a lot that we can do for them. And I understand, like, in shelters, we have such variance in access to diagnostic tools, in budget, of course. But that doesn't mean that we should just say, it's very unscientific to say that kittens just fade. It's just not like accurate.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that if you have a young kitten in your home and it starts to look unwell, get thee to a vet quickly.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yes.
Right.
I mean, if you're in a foster program, you got to be able to advocate for those kittens. And this is a big reason why if you are running a foster program, you can't run a foster program for kittens unless you have very strong protocol in place already, so that when that happens, It's not like, oh, well, we can get you in next week because of the rapid decline that these kittens do face. We need to, okay, if X, then Y, and, we can get them into a vet, we can get diagnostics done. But, a lot of the time there's not time to like wait for like an
Right.
appointment in private practice or something like that. So you do see in shelters a lot of the time it'll be, a technician helping to give fluids or other supportive care interventions.
Like we have a 24-hour triage phone line at our shelter
Love
for
it.
foster cares. And yes, obviously people call on Sunday night because the kitten sneezed, right? It's kind of the joke. It's Sunday night and kitty sneezed and they call the emergency line. But the truth is there are people who need that phone number and can get to
Sure,
a
of
licensed
course.
technician and can make a decision. I have one last question, but before I ask it, I want to just ask either Dan or Michelle if they have anything else before I end on a futuristic note.
No, I'm good. You've answered everything. It's been a great conversation. I really learned a lot. So it's
No,
great.
thank you.
I'm good.
Great.
All yours,
Um,
Stephen, then I'll wrap
all
it up.
right. So yeah, so I want to ask you a little bit about two interrelated, possibly interrelated ideas. One is the topic of hope and the future of sheltering as you hope for it to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am a very, very big believer in the importance of hope. It is something I talk about a lot because I think it's very simple when you're as involved and as immersed in animal suffering as a lot of us in animal welfare are, it can feel hopeless. I think it is incredibly important to look to the past to see how far we've come and then realize, wow, like the things that we do genuinely make a difference. We're just still in the middle of doing them. So, you have to have the hope for the future that we and anybody who says we haven't made a difference. I mean, I've been in this world for 17 years doing kitten welfare. Every single year things are getting better for kittens. It's just, we're learning more people are aware. So that gives me hope to keep going. I would say for my hopes for the future of shelters, you know, about a decade ago, the big thing was more centralizing of kittens in shelters. So wanting to, a lot of shelters were wanting to have like kitten specific nursery rooms, nursery programs where we're centralizing kittens all in one space. And I think that some important lessons were learned from that about disease exposure and even socialization of kittens. I think now the sort of best practices really are looking more at decentralization and placing into foster homes or kind of non facility type spaces. I think that means we have to be engaging the community as much as possible to get people invested because this isn't just a matter of, oh well, we can't just do kitten care on site. It is a matter of it is actually better for the kittens to be in foster homes. Like it is the best thing for them to be in a foster home. So it cuts down their exposure to disease. Obviously, a shelter is like a war zone for an animal with no immune system. So, but it's also better for them socially. It is just better all around. So, I would say on the kitten care side, my hope for the future is that a shelter can be a place that is a resource for foster parents, a place to go to learn, to get the tools that you need, and to get connected to kittens in need, but that they wouldn't necessarily need to be like housed on site because I think that is the better thing for them. The other half of that would be to just have fewer kittens being born to begin with, because I love kittens, but we don't need any more of them. We got plenty. So I think the other piece of what my hope for the future for shelters is that we would really just put a lot of resources towards sterilization, which we know is like the best way to impact kittens, arguably, is to do those like upstream solutions and just get out there and have sterilization programs that prevent more kittens from being born. And along with that, I think as we're seeing that really work in some communities is transport, like having connections between, so Orphan Kitten Club, my nonprofit, we have a very large grant program all across the United States. We have about 140 partners right now, but growing all the time. And so one thing that we're interested in is connecting kind of our lower resourced areas, higher intake areas with our higher resourced, lower intake areas, and having some ability to do for those adoption age kittens to get the kittens in need of adoption to places that, we are seeing fewer kittens. So all across the north, for example, like the northern part of the United States, by virtue of the weather, by virtue of lots of different factors, does see far fewer kittens than along the south. And I think we see transport work with a lot of other populations, but I think that will be important for kittens too in the future.
That's great. That's great. This has been fascinating. Dan, I hand it back to you.
Hannah Shaw, the kitten lady. I mean, if people don't know where to find you, that's on them. But how can people find you?
Sure. So my website is kittenlady.org. And then my nonprofit's website is orphankittenclub.org. And lots of information on both of those. And of course, I'm on social media, and so is Orphan Kitten Club. If you just look up Orphan Kitten Club and Kitten Lady, you'll find us. And every single day we're on there talking about something. We just got our first. I have fostered like over 1,000 kittens, and we just got our first hairless kitten this week.
Oh.
No hair. And she's with her mom and her siblings, and they all have fur, and she is hairless, which is
Why?
wow.
which just goes to show you can be in this world a long time and you still get to see new things. So that was a first for me, a stray mama with a hairless baby. Really interesting.
That's incredible.
You hop online, you'll see her. Her name's Hippo. She's very cute.
So,
That's great.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
If it wasn't
you.
for that kitten up a tree 17 years ago, your life would have taken a completely different turn.
That is true. Yeah.
Just like if I hadn't,
Coco.
just like if my great aunt and uncle hadn't had strays come in and out of their lampshade store in Brooklyn, 50 years ago when I was a kid, which was how I fell in love with cats. This could be the Shelter Dogs podcast for all we know. So you never
They have a
know.
way of finding us.
You
Yeah.
never know. You never know. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been
Thank
really,
you.
really fascinating. Really a lot of information. Kittenlady.org. We'll have the links in the podcast description. This has been episode 76 of the Shelter Cats podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you so much.
I used to hate cats, used to be dogs all the way, till a cat came along, changed my tune. Now I say I prefer cats to people, and cats seem to prefer me too.